Hey folks, I'm Anthony with Anthony Comic Book Art. And it's been a long weekend, but we have a special guy to say hi to, Mr. Alex Saviuk. Mr. Alex Saviuk, how are you doing? How's your weekend?
Oh, the weekend is great. Heroes Con here in Charlotte is a fantastic show. One of the few shows that we have in the States that's all comic books. We don't have any TV people. We don't have movie people. We don't have wrestlers. We don't have any other media event going on except comics, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's what I say that the same thing. You have this show, you have Baltimore is a similar sort of atmosphere where it's just so comic-centric. And, Terrificons could be that way, but he does have some media guests. But I like that show like that, those AAA shows, not those overwhelming big,
Right.
San Diego, New York cons. So, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great, although I'd have to say that after 3 days of a busy show like this, I am very tired.
But we touched on you got your health situation all.
Yeah, my health situation, I'll say I'm maintaining very well right now.
Yeah.
So as long as I get the proper rest and I eat the right foods and I sacrifice a whole bunch of stuff,
right.
As Rodney Dangerfield says, as Rodney Dangerfield once said, hey, if I do everything right, I eat right, I sleep right, I'm just going to get sick and die. But hey, listen, I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying that right now, thankfully, things are going very well.
That's awesome. Now, we did touch on it that you were an SVA graduate in the 70s. That's awesome. You had Will Eisner as a teacher?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, when I was going to college initially, I was pre-med. I wanted to be a doctor. But after a couple of years of that, I realized, well, that's not really my calling. I've always loved comics. And then I transferred and I went to the School of Visual Arts in New York City. And what drove me there was the fact that I knew that Will Eisner was a teacher there. So they looked at my portfolio. They said, "Oh yeah, we can definitely work with you here." So I was taking a lot of elective classes, and Will's was one of them. And I learned a lot, obviously, enough that even though I'm primarily self-taught, when I got out of the School of Visual Arts, I basically put a fanzine together, and with my own work, obviously, and nobody else's. And at the time, Phil Suling was the big convention promoter in New York City and the biggest East Coast distributor as opposed to Bud Plant on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And so Phil doing these big shows in New York, and I happened to go to, I sent him a copy of my fanzine and he ordered 500 copies. So I had to go back to the printer and print up some more, did them all, put them all together myself, drove to his house in Coney Island, dropped them off, and then saw him the following month at his show in New York, and my book was on his table. I asked him how it was doing. He said, hey, people are liking it. There's, seems to be quite a bit of interest. And I went off on my merry way. But within about 20 minutes to a half an hour, I was paged on the PA system to come back to his table. And there was this gentleman there with a shirt and tie on, probably as old as I am now, thumbing through my magazine with a smile on his face. And I was introduced to Saul Harrison, then president of DC Comics.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, are you working? I said, no, I'm looking for work. He goes, how would you like to work for us at DC? So I said, sure. So he had to make an appointment with then art director Vince Coletta. And he said, that's just protocol. I'll tell him you're coming. So I went and I left there with my first published work, which was a one-page mystery story, which appeared in a House of Mystery. I forget the number, but Bernie Wrightson did a Swamp Thing cover on it. And so that was the beginning. And then after that, within a few short months, I started working on Green Lantern and Green Arrow.
That's cool. So that was 77. Okay, I was going to say 75 in that range. But yeah, that's so cool. Saul Harrison hired you on the spot from your fanzine.
Pretty much.
So I asked one simple question, and I've got the whole Alex Saviuk origin story.
Yeah.
That is cool. And then, so it just went from there. And then, when did you cross over and work for Stan?
Well, what happened was, back in 1985, November, let's say Dick Giordano, Jeanette Kahn, the higher-ups up at the DC, they took out everybody that was working on Superman at the time out to lunch. And so we said, oh, well, this is nice. They're giving us some kind of bonus. As it turned out, it was a lunch where they said, listen, the sales on Superman are dying, so we're going to revamp the character, but we're going to bring in some new blood. And so they brought in John Byrne and Marv Wolfman, Jerry Ordway, Dick Giordano, and they were all going to revamp Superman, but they would have lots of work for the rest of us. And the rest of us were, let's say, Kurt Swan, Kurt Schaffenberger, myself, Carrie Bates, Marty Pasco, everybody that was working on writing and drawing Superman. And by the time I kind of didn't think about it too much, but when I went in with this Action Comics number 582, I want to say, a story that I penciled, Kurt Schaffenberger inked, and Murphy Anderson inked my cover, which was just a terrific honor to work with these gentlemen. Anyway, I turned that story in, and Julie Schwartz said, hey, listen, I've got one story left of Superman, and I got to give it to Kurt Swan. I kind of owe it to him. Go see what other work they'll have for you. So I went, down to see the freelance coordinator, and they said, oh, I'm really sorry, I don't have anything for you right now, but hang in there, we'll get something for you soon. Well, I happen to know John Romita Sr. very well since I went to high school with his kids, namely J.R. Jr., the older brother. They lived in the town next to mine. And so, as it turned out, he kind of, I got to meet him when I was 17 and he was 39, okay? And I saw the work that he had in the studio going on with a son, my jaw dropped, of course. But at any rate, he just said, hey, listen, if you really want to do this, just stick with it. And so I did, but as it turned out, I got to DC first. But when I couldn't get work from DC, I called him up and he said, yeah, come on over. We need fill-ins all the time, just off the bat. You could make a living doing that because our guys are always late. So I went over there, dropped off the last batch of Xeroxes from that Superman story I just mentioned. And within a couple of days, I got a phone call and they needed a fill-in on Iron Man number 211. So my first work at Marvel was Iron Man 211, just to make that announcement. And then I did a bunch of covers. I worked on some New Universe books. I worked on The Defenders of the Earth for about 4 issues, Chuck Norris and the Karate Commandos for a couple of issues. And while I was working on The Defenders of the Earth, I got a call from my editor buddy, Howard Mackey. He said, hey, listen, they need a fill-in on Amazing Spider-Man. Can you do it? But I was finishing up this last story of Defenders. I was plotting it. I was drawing it. And I spoke to Jim Salicrup. I said, look, I need another couple of weeks. If you can wait that long, I can't leave these guys, just drop them and go ahead and do yours. He said, fine, do what you got to do. And when I was done with that, I called him up and he said, no, I still need you. So if you can come in, come in. So then that was basically the rest is history. From that issue of Amazing Spider-Man 292, which was important enough because on the last page, Peter proposed to Mary Jane in the airport and she said yes. I did another couple of fill-ins of Amazing, then I filled in on about, 3, 4, 5 issues of Web of Spider-Man, and then I got the regular gig on that. And that lasted about 7.5 years. And then 2.5 years on the animated series, whether it was Spider-Man Adventures or Adventures of Spider-Man. And then I guess when my contract was up at Marvel, I freelanced on the X-Files for 1.5 years, and then I got a call. Stan Lee needs somebody to do the Sunday strip. Would you be interested? And of course, I said yes. And so I started in 1997 doing the Sunday penciling. And then in 2003, early on in February, they asked me if I'd like to ink a week because the regular inker, John Tartaglione, needed a procedure in the hospital. And so I filled in. And then in November of that year, 03, they called up and said John passed away from his illness.
I was friends with his son.
Oh, okay.
Johnny Jr.
Right. And he reached out to me and we talked after, I got the regular assignment to also ink the Spider-Man dailies over Larry Lieber.
That's awesome.
that association continued where I ended up doing 22 years on the Spider-Man strip until Stan passed away. And if Stan would have still been alive, I'm sure we would have been doing it. But
because he really did write it?
He did not. Stan was writing it for a while, obviously for a while. When I got in 97, I think he was still writing it. But then Jim Salicrup filled in, was doing ghost writing for 1.5 years. And then Roy Thomas came into Ghost in 2000. So from 2000 till the end, Roy Thomas was the uncredited writer of the Spider-Man
because
newspaper
they all said
strip.
Stan Lee and Alex Saviuk and
Yeah.
Joe Sinnott some.
And the thing is, it was keep it under your hat that they're writing it because, Kingfishers has an association with Stan, and they don't want to freak out that somebody else is doing it, even somebody with Roy Thomas's credentials. So anyway, that's the deal now. So if anybody has any amazing Spider-Man strips that I drew and Joe Sinnott inked, and Stan Lee's name is on it because he was the editor. Roy Thomas was the writer from 2000 on, so try and get them signed by Roy if you ever see him at the shows.
Right. Well, a lot of them are signed by Stan, though. That's the funny thing. I mean,
Yeah, well, Stan did that to us for us as a favor. I mean, that first batch
to help sell them.
not selling. He just as a favor to us when they said, listen, Mike Kelly, his assistant, said when you finish penciling, sign the bottom, and then Joe Sinnott's gonna sign it after he inks it. And when he goes back to the office, Stan's going to sign it before he sends out the returns. I said, oh, great, fantastic. So for all those years, I always got Stan Lee's signatures on my Spider-Man Sundays.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was kind of neat. And I also got Stan Lee's autograph on my checks because he signed those too. But of course, I don't have those checks anymore because now I had to use those babies up.
You didn't do a Ricky Henderson? You know that story about Ricky Henderson?
No, I don't.
When he signed with the Yankees, he got $1 million bonus check, and he framed it and didn't cash it. Yeah, it's my check, man. And he never he did it. Somebody said, "Why do you have $1 million check on the wall?" And he didn't deposit it.
Wow.
Because he wanted to keep it. That's
Yeah.
silly.
That
but
too.
that's awesome. We got a whole synopsis of the Alex Saviuk career in comics, and what a great career it's been. It's a pleasure to have you, and thank you.
Hey,
for
thanks
sharing.
a lot, man. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it
All
so
right.
much.
Take care now.
Yeah, you take care.
Okay, so long, everybody. See you at the next show. Terrificon.